Hey, Ernie, when it comes to being an audiophile or a person who just gets into audio, when you say Altec Lansing, the reaction is, oh, wow. And you have an interesting story about the Altec account.
Yeah, no, it's true, and Alltech really, and part of that, oh wow, that you're talking about, we experienced too, because the first time you heard sound with movies was through an Alltech Lansing speaker. They were the voice of the theater. That's what their line was known as. Like Sirwin Vega was earthquaking bass or whatever. They were known because they were in all the theaters when sound movies came along and the talkies, the silent movies kind of went away. You were hearing all of that through an Altec speaker, and I was never a big audio buff. I mean, I had speakers, had a turntable, but I was never really discerning about, well, buying these over those, and it was, if it sounded good at all, it was fine with me. It was kind of weird. But when we got a chance to get Alltech, it was very strange how that happened. And it goes back to a guy named Rich Mandela. And I think I had mentioned him to you before. He was one of the first roadies that was when the Rolling Stones came here to do their first tours in America. Rich was one of the main roadies on that crew, and he became good friends with all of them. And then he became like, after that, he became like the liaison person for the manufacturer to the groups. And where we met Rich was when we were doing all the Black Oak, Arkansas covers, and we had talked about them before. Butch Stone, the manager, was approached by a kickbox company for guitar players. They have those kickboxes that they step on and changes the sound and stuff. And Rich worked for one. I'm not sure which one it was, but he wanted to do an endorsement ad for Black Oak, Arkansas, and this kickbox company that he was working for. And he talked with Butch Stone, and Butch said, yeah, we'd love to be able to do an endorsement ad for your product. We use it. Our guitar players use them. But you have to deal with our agency, Pacific Pioneer. And it was like, so this guy, Rich Mandela, shows up one day, and I had never met him. None of us knew him, but he was referred to us by Butch Stone, and he came to talk to us about creating an ad for Black Oak, Arkansas. And it turned out that once we started talking to each other, we realized that, he was with the Stones at one point, knows these guys, and he realized that I was the guy that did the logo for him. And we had not known each other before that, but in I think it was like 19, let's see, trying to think of 73. It was in the late 70s. We became their agency. What happened was he was now working for Altec Lansing. We did that endorsement ad. We sort of stayed friends, but we kind of lost touch over a period of time. And then he came back to us because now he was working for Altec. Okay, and Altec was the guy, James B. Lansing, was an engineer at Altec, and he left and started JBL. And he went back to Altec to do a special series of speakers that were bookshelf speakers, because there was a real target audience with young people and music, and how music was really controlling everything at that time. And so he came back to Altec to do a series of bookshelf speakers, and they were called Altec Lansing. And they needed an agency. And Rich was working with a new marketing director, a guy named Bob Ruffgar, who was actually a professional baseball player, but threw his arm out and then ended up being working in audio, hi-fi and stuff, and went to work for Altec as their marketing director. And Rich was working with him along with another guy named Ray Arbuckle, who these three guys were sort of controlling the brand, the new Altec Lansing speakers. And so we had met Rich, like I said, with Black Oak. And when he got into that situation and found out that Altec was open for an agency, there were like 6 agencies. There was Doyle Dane, there was McCann Erickson, there was these major agencies. and this little company called Pacific Ioneer that nobody ever really heard of, that did album covers, and so Rich reached out to us, and they opened up a competition between all the agencies. And it was great because the Rich Mandela, Ray Arbuckle, and Bob Ruffgar wanted us to be the agency. Okay, they by this time when the competition opened, all three of them had been to our offices. All three of them were partiers. All three of them were big music fans. And, while they're there, Alice Cooper would show up or Burton Cummings would show up. And that was really like, whoa, this is amazing. And so when the shootout happened between all these agencies, we ended up getting the account. And I had come up with this idea because it was, for the first time, they were building speakers for young people, okay? And that was the target audience, college students, kids in high school that were into music, young adults that were now out of college and were into music. And so we created a campaign called, what I did was, I'm a firm believer in, if you're going to borrow something that somebody else did, make sure you do it with somebody that was successful. You don't want to emulate somebody that was a loser. So for me, I was always a big fan of the gray advertising campaign for Volkswagen. I was very impressed with it because they were black and white ads. 2/3 of the ad would be a picture. The bottom third would be text. And they did things like, they showed a beautiful Volkswagen sitting there in this gray seamless background, very simple, a Volkswagen, and it said lemon. And the copy then, because you look at it, you go, lemon, I mean, that's not a lemon, look at that beautiful car. And then the copy explains about how their quality control was so involved in every product, everything that they made, that this Volkswagen had a flaw. And so it didn't go beyond the manufacturing place, and they sort of redid it. So that kind of attitude I really enjoyed. I mean, and they did a series of them. So I came up with this idea, and we called it the Volk Speaker, okay? Because it was speakers for the people at Altec, speakers for people from the people at Altec Lansing. Okay, so it was making this personal kind of connection with the consumer from the people at Altec Lansing. And we emulated the ads, as you can see behind me. We've got, and that was shot on the Paramount movie lot, was a storefront for a hi-fi store. And the headline is, "Last one in's a Volkswagen, or a Volk speaker." Then the next one was the Rod speaker over there. And then with the first ad we did was a bunch of speaker boxes piled with a satin sheet over it with an Altec Lansing logo on it. And it was, you couldn't see the speakers. You could just see the shape of them, and it looked like a car, but they were speakers. And so we did all this kind of crazy stuff. The guy that you see down here in the corner here was a kid named Rick Riccio. And Rick was an engineer, a sound engineer that had perfect pitch. He worked with a lot of people like Jose Feliciano, who was a musician himself, and he helped Altec develop that speaker that went into those bookshelf speakers. And so when we all got together and that campaign started happening, and we were putting out ads. We did probably 7 or 8 different ads. The Rod speaker was an endorsement. We put a sound system into Rod Stewart's. He had just bought a house from Cher in Beverly Hills. And so we put these amazing floor standing speakers that were the floor standing were the ones that were in theaters and big concerts and stuff like that. The bookshelf speaker line was mainly for, home use and stuff. But we did so well with that Volk speaker campaign that we also got the floor standing campaign. And that'll be another story that we talk about.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was really great. We had the account from 1975 to 1977. And in those 3 years, I mean, we took that speaker, that bookshelf speaker, and it was a huge success. I mean, a huge success. They were getting piles of mail from consumers. Dear people at Altec Lansing, and referring to them on a more personal, emotional connection, how great the speakers were, how pleased they were, how they told all their friends. I mean, seriously, they didn't get one or two letters. They were getting sacks of mail. And it was mainly all these young people that were in college, and they made this affordable speaker that sounded incredible. And, they got a lot of feedback. And like I said, within a year or so of that campaign, and it was very successful, that we decided to also do extend it. Rich Mandela was a real car freak, and he had a 915 Porsche, the squared back one you see there in the picture, and he wanted to race it, but he didn't have the money to do it. All he had was that shell. It was just a shell of a car. It didn't have a motor in it. But what we did, we customized it. We designed these spoilers and stuff that went on the car, so it looked really badass. And in fact, a lot of manufacturers ripped those off. What we had done then, and a few years later, they're offering them as aftermarket pieces that you could buy for that particular Porsche. It did so well. We created a poster called The Speed of Sound, and that's what you see up there in that corner. And then there's Bonnie in the jumpsuits. We did I think a couple hundred jumpsuits, and Bonnie, along with other people, would go to the races. But let me back up, because we were in the IMSA series. We entered that Porsche in an IMSA series. All we had was money to do the outside of the car. There was no engine in it. Okay. But it looked really great. And what we did was we hired Cindy Wood, who was the Playmate of the Year in 1976. She was in Apocalypse Now. If you remember the scene where the helicopter lands and all the girls get out and they're dancing, the head one was Cindy Wood, and she was Playmate of the Year. And we reached out to her to become Miss Volkspeaker. And so that's what you see, her in the jumpsuit next to the car. And again, I'll send you the bigger pictures of these so you can show them. It's really hard to see with small like that behind me. But Cindy Wood became the Miss Volkspeaker, right? And what we did was, the IMSA series was a really important and valuable series to reach consumers, because there was a lot of young people into this, and it was like at Laguna Seca and all these different racetracks. And so what we did was we took the car, but we never raced it because it didn't have an engine in it. But what we did was we set it up. We had a half a dozen girls. Bonnie was one. Rich's girlfriend was one. Sometimes Cindy would come, and we would have them sign those posters and be there in the jumpsuits and stuff. And we would get crowds, camels.